KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan, Frog Suit, Frog Mario Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you today, my friend?
Not Tanooki Dagan. I'll take
Tanooki,
Frog Dagan. It's fine.
Yeah, you got to get a little deeper into the game to get the Frog Dagan.
We're just starting out.
Right. Actually, the Tanooki, there's a suit, right? And that's deeper in the game.
Yeah.
Than so actually you're right. You're right. I should have used that. Sorry, the printer's making noise. How are you today, my friend? How's everything going?
You ever have those shirts you can't put in the dryer because you're afraid they're going to shrink. You got to hang dry these shirts.
Every button down.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Your blouses.
My blouse, right, exactly.
Your blouses,
my blouses. Right.
Your sweaters. But I just put on, but you ever put them on when they're still a little damp? They're like wearable, but they're still a little wet. Mm-hmm. I got that going on today. Not a pleasant feeling. Also, why? Look at this shirt. Why did I insist? Why this shirt? Why did I have to wear it damp? I don't know. You're
kind of hoping your body heat dries it as you wear it.
It's working.
Right. Yeah. I don't dry my jeans. Not that I ever wear jeans anymore because I just don't. I basically have one pair of jeans now and I just wear them when I need to go places.
Interesting.
But they always stay wet too. And sometimes you just have to put them on and they're like wet in the leg or something like that.
Wait a second. You won't dry your jeans in the dryer? You hang dry your jeans?
Yeah, hang dry them, yeah.
Oh my God, that's a starchy. I don't know if I could do that's a whole starchy affair. I don't know if that's hardcore.
It is a starchy affair. It is a starchy affair. What? Yeah, the reason I do it, it's funny because jeans, I learned this when I lived in San Francisco and just some random person told me at a store, so who knows if it's true or not, but I think it is.
Yeah.
That jeans actually get bigger. They don't shrink. Even if you wear them and put them in the dryer, like jeans naturally stretch over time.
Expand.
Right. But I'm in desperate need of that expansion. I told you when I went and got my suit for our sister's wedding, I told the guy, he was like, "What's your waist?" And I'm like, 34. And he looked at me and he's like, "Really?"
Maybe he thought it was
and then lo and behold, I wasn't 34 because I don't really wear my pants where they're supposed to be worn. You know?
Yeah, right. That's
and you're in this suit. So it's like we were really going up, like up and up and up. Not good.
Give him some credit. Maybe he thought you were small. Maybe he thought you were 32.
No, I respect that kind of shit. I got to be honest with you. I texted Nick Scarpino, my old friend from Kind of Funny, about it because we have the old joke, and I've said it many times, where like he went into the Chinese laundromat once, or the dry cleaner, and asked him to augment his pants, and they were like, he's like, "Well, how much do you think do we have to do?" And he's like, "They're like all the way." But I remember going into those places and they would just be able to look you up and down and tell you what you needed to do to your suits and stuff like that. It was awesome. So I wasn't mad about it. I was crestfallen because this man knows I'm like holding on to a body form that I just don't have anymore. Hanging on for dear life over here. And I'm eating so many nuts at night. That sounds awful, but like actual nuts,
legumes,
like walnuts, almonds, pistachios, cashews. I'm just going off.
That's good shit.
But it's bad. It's fattening,
It's good, but they say it's the good kind of cholesterol, right?
I don't know.
Walnuts.
Walnuts are so good,
you like
dude.
A cashew.
Oh my God, I love a cashew. Love a pistachio. Love a pistachio.
Can't beat the pistachio.
I just think nuts are so. I want you to put all the nuts in my mouth.
Absolutely. How did they make such a disgusting ice cream out of the best nut? Pistachio ice cream is horrific.
Oh, pistachio. I thought you were going to say, because I was going to say vanilla, but that's a bean.
Oh, no. Vanilla. Glorious. Pistachio ice cream. Yeah, that's a mistake, I think.
I got to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever tried an ice cream in my entire life that wasn't vanilla
Is
ice cream.
Right?
I'm so put off by even the idea of other types of ice cream. Not that I really eat ice cream, but that I'm straight up vanilla. You can't go wrong.
No, vanilla bean, glorious.
Can't go wrong.
Delish. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. I have to go after this. We're actually recording a little earlier than we usually do in the day for us. No one would know if I didn't just say that because I have to go to a psychiatrist appointment this afternoon, but that's good. I'm actually I've been slowly lowering my antidepressant.
That's awesome.
Milligrams per day.
Cool.
And I think it's working. I just want to get off this stuff at some point. All right. Let's talk today about the topic everyone knows because they already pressed play. It's a big one. Super Mario Brothers 3.
What?
The classic NES game that launched in Japan, unbeknownst to all of us, in 1988, and then came to the NES in 1990, 1989, depending on what you read as well. So, Dave, wondering what you think about Super Mario Brothers 3. Now, this is a big topic. I mean, when I brought this topic in, I knew we were going to have a lot to say about it. It's an amazing game. There's going to be so much to say about it, but I don't want to necessarily cover it from the historical. We can cover it from all like where it came from and all of that, but I really want to talk about just playing it and enjoying it, where we were at the time. Keep it light for KnockBack. There are people that have gone. This game's history has been told ad nauseum, and there's a lot of really, really great stuff about it. So you can go read that out there. So I don't want people to think we're going to get into all of that. There are people that can do that better than us, but I want to talk about just playing it and what we think about it, because I was young when this game came out. I was 6, but I remember, and I have vivid memories of obsessing over this game. Everything about it, the Koopa Kids, the airships, the world maps, the warp whistles. This game filled me with such wonder. And I was telling Dagan over text a couple of days ago that when I did this topic, I was like, well, I'm going to play it a little bit, but I know this game very intimately. Like I can see the entire game in my head, basically. But I sat down the other day on Switch to just play it. First of all, the Switch controls, they're awful.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why they... I don't know where they get off just switching the controls like this. It's
not good.
And then making you go in and fix it yourself. But nonetheless, you have to use like the top row of buttons. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
You want to use the lower buttons like you would in Super Mario World. So I don't know. It's really bizarre. But I sat there and I was just like, I was just going to take a few notes and just a few things that pop up that I might want to talk about in this very well-worn game. And then 2 hours later, I'm in like World 6. Yeah.
This game will do that to you.
Yeah. And I was like, one more stage. And I'm good at it. So it's not really like a huge challenge. There were certain points where I was like, why am I I kept as little Mario. I think in the water world, I was a little Mario and kept dying on a Hammer Brother because you're in the shallow water when you're fighting it. And if you're little Mario, you can't move. And he wouldn't go around the map. So it just kept going in. I couldn't even use one of my items. So I died probably like 5 or 6 times on that. But otherwise, it was a pretty smooth affair. And I was like, I got to go do something else. I can't keep playing the same game over and over again.
So good, though.
But I am eager to hear what you think of Super Mario Brothers 3 and where your mind goes when we discuss it.
I'm excited that you wanted to do this. I mean, we're taking you guys back to the classics. What you said a couple of minutes ago. Can you even imagine a time where, for instance... Well, just think about it from today's perspective. Can you imagine Japan had a video game and we didn't even know about it for the better part of 2 years? I mean, this was we are hearkening back to a long lost, forgotten time with this game. And there's so much to say. And it's nice just to be returning to a classic. I mean, many people consider this one of the greatest video games of all time. If you're an old enough gamer, I'm sure it's probably on your top 10 video games of all time. Just one of the absolute goats. And I loved it. You were 6 when it came out. I was a freshly minted 16-year-old. So I had a slightly different perspective, but I was right there, day one, enjoying the hell out of this game. And it just reminds me, it's timely in a way because the Super Mario movie, Nintendo and Illumination's Mario film came out just a week ago.
Murdered.
Filming this, right?
Murdered. Just absolutely murdered. It made absolutely so much money.
Sanity. And also ironic because the animation industry is in dire straits right now. The animation artists are in dire straits right now. It's definitely a downturn in the industry. So this movie will definitely help spread the gospel. I'm already hearing great things about, and for instance, an animated Stranger Things series on Netflix. Right,
I saw that come up on my Twitter feed.
Super huge. So hopefully the upswing is quick, and we can forget about this.
And Star Wars, didn't they announce their new?
Yeah, Visions 2.
Visions 2, which is cool.
I think Aardman, Wallace and Gromit people have a piece in there, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not Aardman, it looks egregiously Aardman. So I didn't research it yet.
We should just spend $100,000 and secretly make like an IG-88 cartoon and then just send it to them and be like,
how sick would that be? Yeah. Great topic too. I would love that. But where was I? Oh, so with Mario.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I mean, there's so much. There's going to be a lot of hopping around on this episode, but really enjoyed going back and playing. I got the cart right here for you guys watching. I mean, what more iconic video game image is there than this?
It is. It's totally the yellow. It's label. Brilliant. I don't know who made. I'd be curious to know who did the package art for it.
Oh, that is a little fella, a little undersung Nintendo hero named Yoichi Kotabe.
Oh, interesting. We'll keep pulling that out.
Because you know what? Look at this, just that. Forget the package. Forget the iconic yellow. Everybody knows that's emblazoned in our souls. But just that Mario is such an appealing piece of artwork.
Definitely.
And I think that and the Super Mario 2 label, you know, all the iconic old school 2D Mario art sent me on a rabbit hole probably a couple years ago. And there is an undersung YouTube video by about this undersung artist called, you guys could go look it up after the show. First, you got to listen and watch. The Mario Designer Forgotten by Time. And it's all about Yoichi Kotabe, who I guess was recruited by the powers at Nintendo sometime in the 80s and took over with Shigeru Miyamoto's vision, just took over the illustration duties basically of branding and marketing and designing what Mario would go on to be our modern day Mario iterations that we all know and love. So this guy is a big part of the story, but this Mario, this piece of art is one of my all-time favorites. And it was just fun to go back and play this game because you and I have talked about it in the past when we've done our brief flirtations with Nintendo topics, but growing up, I think what kept this game from being one of my all-time favorites, as much as I loved it, was that you couldn't save the game. I was just old enough to know that was just too egregious of a thing. Because this game was a big time investment, especially as you grew on, as you got started and learned how to play. It was an hours and hours worth of your time. So that was the one thing that kept me from really sort of singing its praises and giving it its flowers like it probably deserved. But now you could just play. I'm surprised you didn't play on the NES Classic, the NES Mini, Kyle, because now you could do those frame by frame save states. You could literally pause it.
I don't know if those are in the Wii, or not the Wii, the Switch Virtual Console. I actually don't know.
Oh, I don't know either, actually.
It's funny you bring, I think it might be, although, because I played, when we did Ocarina of Time, I played that on Switch, and there was a save state function in the N64 module, but I never used it. Because I just felt like it was kind of not the way you're supposed to play it. But you're right. That's where the warp whistles come in.
Yes.
And it's actually a very clever thing when you realize that that's why they made them so easy. And like I would argue maybe the most iconic secrets in video games are the locations of the whistles. Everyone knows those. That was actually my very last Game Facts guide. You can go look at it. I wrote it when I was a senior. I came out of retirement, wrote it as a senior in college.
What?
And I just randomly wrote this random FAQ and put it on Game Facts about warp whistles. Made like these ASCII maps and did all of that, which was fun. But it's funny, man, because you're right. The game is bulbous. It's huge. We had never seen anything like it before. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it comes off as important as it was now. If you showed this to a kid today, do they understand? Do they think this is very fun? And do they understand why it's a very fun game and very important game? Because you're right. Mario 3 would probably be in a top 10 or top 25 of mine. I think that I've kind of mentally replaced it with Mario World, just because I think Super Mario World is actually a better game. It's a much more sophisticated game, but it's built on the bones of this game.
Absolutely.
Completely.
Sure.
And so you've got to, it's very much Mega Man 1 to Mega Man 2 in that sense. Although I think Mega Man 1 is way worse than Mega Man 1 is not a very good game, frankly. Super Mario 3 is still, even if Mario World never came out, just an absolute banger of a classic.
Yeah, true.
And so I think there's a few things there's more than a few things I wanted to talk to you about, but I'm wondering what sticks out to you most about the aesthetic. What about this game looks different than the original Mario? One of the things I love about studying NES games, and I think you probably feel the same, is that it seems to be the console, at least the cartridge-based console, that saw the most expansion. People figured out how to get the most out of it. And I always bring up Mega Man 6 as being a really great example of that. A 1994 Western release, so very late. I mean, at that point, we're 2 years away from N64.
Unbelievable.
And they're still releasing these games. And Mega Man, I mean, we put Mega Man 6 next to Mega Man 1. And they're the same system. And they run this. They're basically the same game, but they are completely different. And so I think that this is a really wonderful example of that, especially with first party prowess, to just know the machine. It's crazy to play a game like Super Mario Brothers, the original one, which is so wonderful. I love the original game too. And then just go to this and be like, wow, this is the same.
Unbelievable.
Where did this even come from? Where did all these wonderful ideas come from? So talk to me. I mean, let's expand any way we can.
I mean, the evolution of Mario is fascinating. I think about oftentimes if you chart it back from the late 70s, early 80s with Donkey Kong all the way to what we know today, let's say Super Mario Odyssey. That's a fascinating conversation. But I think just the NES main trilogy of Mario's is a fascinating conversation in itself. And like you said, that evolution from 1 to 3, how dynamic the shift was. And I always think back to Super Mario 1 at the launch of the NES, at least in North America for us, because that was such a big moment in home video games. But there was something about Mario 1. It's certainly a classic in its own right, one of the greatest games. And of course, everything's built on the foundation of that game. But that game was somewhere, it is very primitive, even by Mario 3 standards in 89, 90, because I always felt like the first Super Mario Brothers game in 86, 87 was a little bit of this new generation of 8-bit gamings, but it still felt like it was still coming out of the Atari age. It still felt very video gamey in its graphics, very pixelated, very simplistic, and also in the game design itself, where it was all about, there was still some sort of semblance of score and all that kind of stuff. It was still coming out of the old age. Still coming out of the late 70s, early 90s, or early 80s, where Super Mario 3 was taking Mario, which I guess arguably you could say started with Mario 2, but it was becoming a proper cartoon. And you could see, like you said, Super Mario World being built on the foundation of Super Mario 3, because this was almost, it felt very much like what we'd go on to know would be a 16-bit game. And of course, if you look at the Super Mario All-Stars game, which came out in 92, 93 for Super Nintendo, that version of Super Mario 3 on that SNES cart is a 16-bit version of the game. But it's not that much different than the original. So it is a classic story in just a few years of how people learn how to wring the juice out of the hardware and really exploit that NES to its probably absolute maximum ability, right? You're definitely exploiting that machine for everything it's worth. You're wringing out all the goodness and learning how to really exploit the hardware. And of course, by enhancing the carts with chips and all these other things, it is crazy how far it came in just about 3 years. That it is that dynamic shift. It almost is like a similar thing with Mega Man, from Mega Man 1 through Mega Man 6, all the NES iterations. It's like, wow, look how far they've come. Look what they could do. But it is built on that skeleton of Mario 1. It's just taking everything, blowing out all the boundaries and taking everything to the nth degree. This game does so much. And I think probably pound for pound, especially if you just look at this generation of games, just the 8-bit generation, Kyle, I think it's probably the best game in how many different ways you could interact with your enemies and with the environments. There's so much variety. It's wildly inventive. It's fun. It's consistent with Mario. It's sort of built upon it, but taking it to the next level. And it's so whimsical. I think part of the charm, too, is holding on to those Japanese origins and how refreshing and fun that felt, especially probably, I would say, from North American audiences. Especially, I'm a little jealous of you because you're right in that age wheelhouse when it came out to really have achieved maximum wonder. I was 16. I wasn't beating around the bush. I was in, and I was very transparent about it. But that childlike wonder it must have captured for your generation. And also probably, I would argue, this is where modern Mario really started from.
Yes,
definitely. And this was really the origin points for everything that the franchise would go on to be. And just, again, I think I love it more and more with every passing year, because I think what kept me from really adoring it was that it was just a little too obtuse in the fact of always having to start from the beginning. That, for some reason, that just really aggravated me. But also the fact that we've celebrated this game since day one, and the fact that that was almost overlooked. That's how good this game is. The fact that it didn't even bother people enough to be off-putting or to be a barrier for entry. People were just like, all right, well, whatever. That's how good this game was. And I think they knew that. I think that's why they didn't put a battery save, a password save. They could get away with it because this game is brilliant from A to Z. I mean, from soup to nuts. And that's what, you know what, I also found myself thinking this last night as I was writing some notes, jotting down some thoughts. And it really does make me pine for the way Nintendo used to be. You know, they never rested on their laurels. They always went out, I think under the creative lead of Shigeru Miyamoto, because I think this is very Miyamoto. They always set out to create something new. And they spared no expense. And they never seemed to ever rest on their laurels. They always seemed to be sort of breaking out into some inventive new territory, trying something new and taking a risk, and with such confidence that it was going to be successful. I miss that Nintendo, because think about, not only did they really save home video games in the 80s, which is not hyperbole. That really is kind of the fact. They did it in such a boldly creative way without pinching pennies, and really just inventing a whole new space for video games, for creativity, and for innovating. And I don't think it's like that anymore. I think they're much more conservative now, and maybe that's the inevitable trajectory of a company once they become massive. With this game, they were in the process of becoming massive. I think this game sold, or 1989 might have been a $3 billion year for them. I think I read. So, you know, now they're Disney, right? But they were in the process of becoming that back then. So that also kind of gets me a little misty-eyed and a little bit nostalgic when I think of if Nintendo, or if any company could just continue on that type of trajectory with creativity and always breaking out into new territories and trying new things. And they were in the they were inventing Mario still. And, you know, it's a great period to pine for. And if you look at the skip from Mario 1 to Mario 2 and Mario 2 to Mario 3, there was that creative energy, you know, always wanting to try something new. And I like that they kind of went back to after Mario 2, which was obviously a severe departure, and some of us loved it and some of us liked it less, but it was a dynamic shift. I like going back to Mario 1 in sort of all ways and just saying it's Mario 1, but just like with the doors blown off it. It reminds me very much of what Konami did with Castlevania, where they went Castlevania 1, Simon's Quest, and then Castlevania 3 is a lot like 1, but just with, you know, taken to the nth degree. To
the amazing level that 3 went to. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a game. Yeah, you say so much here. I was kind of jotting down different things because I think I want to touch back on the topic you were bringing up about Childlike Wonder and being able to capture a game at the right time. I don't know if I was the right age for Mario 3 because I was probably maybe even a little young for it. But what I can tell you is that I have specific memories of playing it, and specific memories of playing it with you, and specific memories of being around it. And I don't know if you remember this, but a really iconic memory for me is, and I was just explaining this to Micah, was when I was a kid, I had a bunch of Lego sets that people would buy, but they weren't like today. So there wasn't licensed sets. It was an airplane and a castle and all these different things. And I eventually they just all ended up in the same container, right? So one of the things I had though were from these sets were like planks and props, like airplane props and all these things. And I don't know if you remember, I used to try to build the airships for like, as a little kid, I was obsessed with the airships from Super Mario Brothers 3. And because I had those propellers that you would put on like a prop airplane for the set, I would just put them on the back of this thing I would create and try to create the, you know,
that's so cool.
You know, loved it. And so that is that sense of wonder that really was captured in me and that I really did love. And you're right that Mario, the rules of Mario begin here in some ways. You kind of get shadows of it, obviously, in Super Mario 1. Mario 2 is awesome. Dagan actually thinks that game is really awesome. I do too. I think it's totally underrated. And when people learn that it wasn't a real Mario game, then it became kind of in vogue, I think, to just be like, wah. But a lot of people loved that game back then, and I remember that very clearly too. And that game filled me with its own sense of wonder and awe. It felt very dreamlike, which is the intent of the game. And they did always take risks, and you always do appreciate that about Nintendo. And sometimes the risks don't work out. One game I remember being really disappointed in, actually, as a kid, older at that point, was Super Mario World 2, which I was like, they changed it. And I was like, what is this? I don't like this at all. And so it doesn't, for me, always work out. But you're right that the rule set begins here. And then in Mario World, they kind of expand on it. They put the color blocks in Star World, all of the different secrets and ways out of the stages. But they kind of begin that here. In fact, Micah was just watching me play it. Her being unfamiliar with the game, I'm in World 1's fortress towards the end. And I'm like, you want to see a weird secret? And then she's like, yeah. And I just fly above the wall and get the whistle. And I'm like, this is probably the most iconic secret in Nintendo history. Like this one right here. And everyone knows that. And then they know that if you can get to the second world without using the whistle, then get the other whistle there, then you can use them both, get to the 8th world and beat the game in 2 seconds.
It's incredible.
And so you could basically go, because I remember one of the things, and I want to talk about the individual worlds, but I used to love going to the 4th world, the big world, because it was just so, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And now as an adult and someone who understands video games very deeply now, it's not that impressive. Actually, it's crazy how little is going on in that world and how easy it is to get through that world. But at the time, I was filled with that wonder and awe as well. So one of the things that I liked about the game was the nonlinearity of it in the world map. Optional stages, mini games, different routes to go, Hammer Brothers wandering around, the airship getting away from you. I'm curious what you thought about that. And are you the person, do you play like World 1-4 and stuff like that? And like all the optional stuff? Because I like to be complete.
Yes.
I like to do everything. I got to do it all. I'm wondering how you play the game.
Yeah, I like to hit every level. I don't use the Lakitu Cloud to skip a level or anything like that, because you know what the incentive is, I was reminded when I played this time through, is accumulating the 3 cards at the stage, and I know how to get the star every time. So, and I need those free lives, because later on there's some, I wouldn't even say later on, probably starting in World 4, there's some bugaboo levels that are like,
you get 5 lives, right, for the star?
You get 5 for the star.
3 for the flower,
3 for the flower, 2
and 2 for the mushroom, and then or maybe 1 for the mushroom.
Yeah, I think I think it's 1 regardless. 2 for the.
I got mushroom. A mushroom
for you. But this is one of those games where you don't want to miss anything, because it's so fun, and you might miss a level that's super inventive, and some of them are aggravating. This game has a really wonderful, just so difficulty level. I think it's inclusive, but it's also hard enough for a hardcore gamer to challenge themselves, but sort of welcoming the kids. I'm sure you would remember this. I'm sure kids got aggravated with it, but just brilliantly done as far as game design and as far as difficulty. And I love what you say too about just invoking kids' imaginations. That's something, because of my age, I missed out on, but I'm sure this was the ultimate. Like what you're saying, you want to take it outside the game. You want to hang on to that experience by building Legos or drawing pictures or playing make-believe with your friends. I'm sure this game really did that. I mean, now we could look back in retrospect and see the amount of merchandise and the McDonald's Happy Meals and the lunch boxes and the t-shirts and all the marketing and branding. But this game really did capture the imaginations of many. And it is interesting to think, right? Like, how can you possibly top the first pack-in Super Mario game? That was one of the games outside the arcade where I saw kids loving it and I saw adults devouring it. It was like one of those things. How do you make that even better? And I think they did with Super Mario 3. Again, that was the only Achilles heel for me, was that lack of save. And again, because I was old enough to realize that, it was almost as egregious as I think back. Like, what if Metroid didn't have a password save? Are you kidding me? Do you want me to sit here for 10 hours and play this game? And that's once I know it. That's once I know it like the back of my hand. So that was amazing. I'm harping on that issue, but I've never seen a game get away with murder like that. I mean, that's how great this game is. And it was damn close to a 16-bit game. I can't believe how long, first of all, Europe, I think it was a full 2 years. Right? Two and a half years.
They weren't really into Nintendo, like we were. So they got things late. No. It says here, we got it February. Well, PlayChoice got it. I don't remember playing it on a PlayChoice ever. 1989. Right. I want to ask you about that. Yeah. But then February 1990 is when we got it, and they got it August 1991. So about a year and a half later. Yeah. Yeah,
that's when the SNES came out in North America. August.
Yeah, it was already, the SNES was already out at that point. Yeah.
That's insane. That's another thing too. What brilliant!
They shouldn't have been playing their fucking whatever the fuck nonsense they were playing, Commodore or whatever they were playing.
They
were
still PCing over there.
They were all about that. Yeah, Commodore. Amiga. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
It is interesting though, Kyle. That's another brilliant thing. Another brilliant marketing move by Nintendo, and a lot of this has to do with Nintendo of America, who were pretty brilliant back in the day. And this will come up later in the conversation as well, but. What better way to close out the 8-bit era for the last year and a half in North America than with this game? This was the holdover between the back half of the NES to the launch of the SNES in August 91. We had this game to sort of bridge the gap. And it felt like, what better game? Because this felt like a 16-bit game in many ways. It was that much of an exclamation point on top of everything that came before, especially Nintendo. Think of Nintendo proper and the games they developed and published, not Capcom, not Konami, not Hudson Soft, not Sunsoft, but actual Nintendo proper. Unbelievable. This game just ages like a fine wine. I mean, that's why we're sitting here talking about it. And it's crazy. I would love to see Nintendo go back and just do something like this again. They have integrated 8 and 16-bit games into Galaxy and into Odyssey specifically, and had those little sort of, little twists. But it would be and of course the Mario Maker games, which are awesome. But
they are.
But it would be really cool to see them go back and do something like this again and see.
Like a Mega Man, you want like a Mega Man 9.
Sure. Yeah. Why not? Give it a shot. It wouldn't even cost.
That was so cool.
Much.
I feel like that was such a one-off, or it was actually a two-off with Mega Man 10 as well.
9 and 10, sure.
But I was like, wow, I actually got my own games for once. And I was thrilled. And I don't know if they realize how thrilled people would be, but I do think that they look at Mario Maker as being like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Just go make your own game.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say, though, that I think my thing with Mario and my thing with Nintendo, generally speaking, is this is true with a lot of things. So it's not exclusive to them. It's just that when you don't embrace flat 2D anymore, when you're going 2.5D or especially 3D, that's why I think Super Mario Galaxy, for instance, is fucking amazing. That game is absolutely so good. Bonkers good. And I people know how I feel about Sunshine, but they're never going to be as special to me as this game or Super Mario World. And it's not because they're 3D to 2D or I was older. I was fucking at IGN when Galaxy came out, but
yeah.
And that game was just absolutely, I was floored by it. Phenomenal. My first game of the year vote actually was Super Mario Galaxy as an editor. Game. And there's no, and the second one was awesome too.
Yeah.
But I do feel like that might be the last time we really got a true. First of all, Galaxy 2 is only the second to last time we got a true AAA Mario game anyway. So it's not like we're really talking about very much here. But I guess what I'm saying is that when I got to Mario Odyssey, I didn't like it that much. I was really surprised by how much people sold that game to me. And I was just like, I don't know, man. This just feels like I'm not saying this is bad. This is about as good as it gets for what they're trying to do, but the magic's missing for me. And maybe that is maybe it goes back into what we were saying in some way, Dig, which was, I think I said this to you, I articulated this to you, I might have said it to someone else, which is that people begin with Nintendo typically and then they graduate.
Yeah. Yes.
And now some people stick with the Nintendo, but the beauty of what Nintendo has and what PlayStation or Xbox lack is that it's like your baby's first video game. Not because it's bad, but because it's so well designed, so intuitive, so multi-aged.
Yeah.
You can, like, an adult and a grandma and a 4-year-old can all look at Animal Crossing and get it and understand it and like it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's a very unique Nintendo thing. But they rely on nostalgia, which we're beasts for. I mean, I'm a beast for nostalgia, but they really rely on nostalgia plus the idea that, well, we're just getting new people all the time. Who gives a shit?
Right.
Think about your own son and his journey with Nintendo.
Yes.
And the games he came up, his seminal Nintendo machine is going to be the Wii U.
That is.
Which is...
He cut his teeth on that.
I'm aghast by that.
Yeah.
For many reasons, but that's just the reality of his experience. And so they're able to take someone like that, even though he is very backwards looking and understands old games, to say, like, well, this is new for you, this is new for you, and this is new for you. But by the time you're older, you really have to be in for that or not. And I think what I'm realizing with my own taste is that it could be hipster energy, but I don't think it is. I'm not harnessing it that way. But when things become too big or too popular, I'm just not interested anymore.
Yeah.
And I because I think it becomes too commoditized. I saw it, and I know people get so mad. I'm sorry. I'm just explaining how I feel. At Star Wars Celebration, they had this thing where it was like all these different timelines. And I just looked at that and I just was like, I can't believe what you've done to this. It is so beyond saving for me that I have to let it go. And, I feel that way about Disney and MCU and all of that. And Nintendo, like you said, Nintendo is Disney, and they do have that vibe.
They do.
And now the vibe is high quality. The vibe is beautiful.
Yes.
The vibe is timely, right?
Yes.
The vibe is adults and kids, nostalgia, drawing everyone in. But nonetheless, it's not really why you get into games anymore. And I think one of the reasons why I think Mario 3 is so notable is because it's one of those games that I play for fun. And I know that I say this all the time on Sacred Symbols, and it sounds interesting to people, and some people don't quite relate, but I'm not playing games for fun typically. Like, or just straight up fun.
Yeah, sure.
I think of a game like Mega Man 11, and even that, I'm not playing it really for fun. That's a game that's like sheer curiosity, like what's going on here. I don't even know. Maybe a game like Slay the Spire or something might be the last game I sat down and I'm like, I'm gonna have fun right now with this game. But usually it's, I want to know more about the characters. I want to know more about the plot. I want to experience the world. We just did Resident Evil 4 remake.
Sure.
The spoiler cast for that.
Yeah.
Now that's fun. Certainly. And in fact, the Mercenaries add-on mode is really fun because it's all gunplay. But I'm not playing it for that reason.
Right. Because
it's experiential, I guess is the note.
I like putting it that way.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So Mario, if Nintendo captures anything, it's the essence of fun. And since that's the basest root of gaming play, then I can't really dispute their place there. I just more dispute and I think understand my own evolving nature, that I can't be alone in this, and that there's just different tastes for different people, and that the brand that I've really gleamed onto as a gamer over the last 25 years, which is PlayStation, is actually the brand that seems to be least reliant on its past. And maybe that is the low key reason why I like it, is because it doesn't seem to really be. What would Nintendo have done with Sackboy?
Yeah,
we would have had 7 million Sackboy games, right? What would have Microsoft done with Killzone or Resistance? They would have never gone away, just like Halo and Gears have never gone away. Now, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But we're buttressed in between these two realities of the manufacturers making games. And in between is a company that I feel like does the most new, intuitive things and walks away at some point. Now, they're having a harder time walking away as we're going to get 17 Horizon games in the next 2 years. But at least that's the way it was. And I wonder, as I try to kind of analyze myself, if that was the ultimate attraction of the machine, was not only its very Japanese role-playing game nature and all these kinds of things, but that it was just constantly different.
Yeah. Yes. I think that's brilliantly said. Yeah. And I think old Nintendo was different. And this happened a long time ago. This didn't happen last year. But at some point along the way, with the advents of the PlayStations and the various iterations of the PlayStation, and of course Microsoft coming in, Nintendo became reactive. It stopped becoming creative, and they took, yes, it's always backed by design, it's always backed by quality. Absolutely, 100%. No matter what, you can't take that away from Nintendo. They only put their names on things they really believed in. And of course, what makes the NES age era so fascinating was because they did put their name on some crap, and there were a lot of workarounds with, unlicensed games and all that kind of stuff. A fascinating era, but Nintendo at some point became less creative and more reactive to the space and their place and their role in that space. And I think at the same time sort of developed a reverse of their old inclination to create new things and just try and explore fresh horizons and just really sort of embrace, like you said, play, and just something that's going to catch on and something that's just going to be out and out fun. I think they're much more reserved. I think they're much more conservative than they used to be. And I think part of it is, listen, celebrate your heritage, celebrate the origins, the past, cash in on nostalgia, whatever your business need to make money. But at the same time, have that other 50% that's future facing. And where are we going to go from here? Because they are a fascinating story with that, because I can't even tell you, there might be people more knowledgeable, you guys and gals listening may even know this, but I don't even know where Mario goes now. And it's been a while since Odyssey. Yeah. So
yeah, it has. It's been 6 years, I think.
Right. And I'm not talking about the Mario Kart games. I mean, that could be the answer too. Maybe.
But wasn't the Mario Kart game, wasn't that even a re-release, the big one?
Yes.
At some point. So it's like, and Smash Brothers is
Smash is the other thing. So it's going to be interesting to see where
you can't dispute though, because I don't want to come off as a hater. Like, it works. Obviously,
always. People
will just hand over fist buy it, but I am going to make fun of people that buy Pokemon still and certain things, because it's like, why are you buying these over and over again? I was there over and over again. I was, as I note all the time, way too old for Pokemon when it came out. And I was still all about it because I was a huge Nintendo fan, but even I broke away. I'm so fascinated by that ecosystem, I guess, because it gets reborn.
Yes.
Just constantly, but not with games. It gets reborn with audiences that experience things for the first time, and their first coming is Super Mario Odyssey, which would be like the Mario 64 or the Sunshine or the Galaxy for someone else. And then they release these interstitials, but because they refuse to really truly embrace 2D as a concept and really I just feel like companies don't feel like they can charge for those kinds of games anymore, a premium penny. And that's another thing Nintendo does that I think is so impressive, is that they don't drop the price of anything. They just sell their game. They'll sell 35 million copies of Animal Crossing at $60. With every single person buying it that way, when that's not the way it works anywhere.
No.
I mean, Grand Theft Auto 5 sells hand over fist still because it's fucking $10 or $20. So I find that fascinating too.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, go in. And I'm not just talking about, being like the Louis Vuitton of video games. We all know Tears of the Kingdom is going to be $70. They were very transparent about that. But go into a party city and just buy some Mario, paper plates and cups and just kids party stuff. It's all more expensive than the other stuff because it's got that Nintendo premium, that Nintendo seal of quality. I mean, I look at it, you cut your teeth on Super Mario 3, right? My son, Graydon, was born in 2010. Because of when he came along, his first console that he really was cognizant of was the Wii U, but he really did kind of cut his teeth on the Switch on Mario Odyssey. That was his thing. And I always tried to kind of get back behind him and see it through his lens. Like he was a little viewfinder, and I could see, and I did the same. I did that with Odyssey with him. I did that with Breath of the Wild, and just kind of see what he sees and see how he sees it, realizing that he didn't grow up in arcades in the 70s. He didn't grow up in Time Out in the malls in the 80s. He didn't grow up with the NES and the SNES and the first iterations of the disk systems and all that kind of stuff. And just look at it through his very fresh, very young perspective. But it's interesting because, and maybe this is just Graydon, but I don't think so. I don't see the same level of passion, and I don't see it striking a chord like we were hit with the stuff we grew up with. There's something diluted about it. And it's not just because I'm older looking at it through rose tinted glasses. I think there's something missing. You know what I mean? Maybe it's that it's less creative. It's more kind of resting on what came before. It's cashing in on a known commodity, something they know is going to be successful. Maybe that's just the very nature of an IP. As it goes along, it's gonna get diluted, and some of that magic is going to be dispelled with each iteration. Maybe that's just a natural progression of things. But it is interesting, and I would love to see. We know what's coming next for Zelda. It would be really cool to know what's coming next for Mario, but they seem so protective of it, and maybe rightly so. We talked about this a little bit on Constellation, where I heard somebody say the Mario movie, Illumination's Mario movie, is interesting because eventually, if we have our druthers, and if our perspective is correct, eventually this is what a Mario game is going to look like. That sort of fidelity, that level of animation, that frame rate, that amount of color, the nuance,
that'd be awesome. Not on
quality,
Switch,
right? But who is that important though?
It could be like that's why I'm saying like I think their new Mario game will be a launch game for the next system. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near making it look like that. I think that the new console you could expect to be somewhere in the realm of PS4's power probably, which I think will be totally reasonable for what will have to be a thin, light handheld. That's just kind of the lane they've chosen, which I think is very wise, but
sure.
We'll see. Like the thing that I think that they have the benefit, just like everything else, right? You and I say something, and I say this all the time, that I have a major advantage as being a PlayStation pundit, for an example, or even a Nintendo fan, a lapsed Nintendo fan, is that I was there the entire time.
Yes.
So that's not like a look at me, look at how cool I am, or a hipster thing. It's to say, I don't have to go back and study or experience it. I already have.
Right.
And at some point, you're never going to be able to experience that. And so I can imagine, like your son, Graydon, being so overwhelmed by the past, the present, and the future of Nintendo that it all wraps up in the same. I think it's the same magic that Disney has even managed to capture people in, including people like me. I was born in 1984, so I missed basically half of Disney, right? So when I was a kid, I always had The Little Mermaid, and then The Lion King, and Aladdin. Well, it was Aladdin, and then The Lion King, and then Pocahontas, and so on and so forth. But I also worked backwards. So I was always captivated. And I wasn't there like people in the 50s or 30s or 40s were there for all these different things. And so you have to kind of naturally learn it. And I think part of that wonder is why Nintendo works. And that wonder is missing from PlayStation because they don't celebrate their history as much. The big series that they care about are all still present in some way. We all know that a new Uncharted's coming. God of War, they won't let go of. Twisted Metal is getting a TV show. They're celebrating their past in that way, but they never brought game. There's no game from the PS1 era except for Gran Turismo that still exists today. And that's pretty interesting, right? And that's 10 years after the NES.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the point I'm making. So it's both an advantage and a curse. It's an advantage if you're in it and you want to be there in PlayStation, which is where I am. So I just absorb it as it comes. I platinum every one of these games that come from the first party studios. But I can imagine if you're coming into it as a 20-year-old, it's pretty daunting. And that might make you more of a fan or less of a fan. I don't know. But I think that's relevant. And we have a very unique experience that we will have been there the entire time. So we never have to learn. Well, there's always something to learn, but we never have to study and put ourselves in that position because we were in that position.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a diatribe there.
Sure.
Okay.
No, it's good.
Let's talk about, well, you never answered my question. So you back about world maps. So you do all the stages, right? You like to go do all the different things. So let's talk a little bit about the different worlds. What's a world that really stands out to you? I brought up the fourth world, which I remember really being mind blowing as a kid. And what you realize is that they're just zoomed in and made the sprites huge, and the NES can't do very much. So it makes that actually the most simple stage. I used to really, really love that stage. The one stage the one world that I really thought was cool going back. I mean, I know them all so well, so it's hard to get new information out of them. But I really do like World 3. That's a world that a lot of people don't like, the water world. But what I like about it is that it's underwater stages. Then there's like stages above the water, stages that go in and out of the water, stages with just a skimming of the water. It's not just underwater stages. And I know people don't like underwater stages, whether it's in Mario 1, whether it's Bubble Man and fucking Mega Man 2 or any of these different things. People don't like these stages that much, but I do. I think they're fun. And one of the things that I think the water worlds and the water stages in Mario really bring out is just the cute characters.
Yes.
Like the fish. I just love, they're so dumb. And I love when I shot one with like a fire flower, and because the water suspends you, it just like goes like in a slow arc. And it's just upside down and his mouth's open, you know? It's so wonderful and so cute. But yeah, talk to me about some of your favorite worlds that stick out to you.
Poor little cheap. Yeah, nobody likes a water world. That's a whole 2D Mario game underwater would just drive people bonkers. No one wants
and into
to slow
Zelda,
down.
right? Because everyone hates the water dungeon, right? And
Yes,
Ocarina of Time.
Yes. And I have to admit, I'm kind of a mark for that too. I find myself getting aggravated in the water world. But you're right. You don't have to be submerged in the water the whole time. Sometimes you're running along the bridge on top of the water.
The fish is coming up. It's so cute.
Oh, it's so cute, dude. It's adorable and it's colorful, right? I like the variety. You know, you have the grass world, you have the desert world, you have the ice world, you have the pipe world, and the water world, the giant world. I wish I remembered my first reaction to it because it's such a cool idea. And there's always such hyperbole with my memory and thinking back to it because I'm always expecting everything to be super massive and blown out. But back then, just making those sprites 4 times the size or whatever was making those bricks and those power-ups and those Koopas and the Goombas.
Yeah, the bricks turning into the little bricks when you hit them. Oh,
it's so cool, dude. Yeah. It's so awesome. I mean, the only way you could have made it better is to make Mario smaller or make a micro world where everything was super tiny. That would have been interesting too. But it's such a fun, again, just the whimsy of the designs and the colorful environments, always something different to look forward to, which was always an incentive to traverse a world no matter how hard it is, because you know the next one is going to be something new and something fresh and something fun. And I think about just, there's so much whimsy in this game and so much imagination where, like, let's take Mario. We want to make him fly. What would be the thing, right? You would say, let's give him a pair of wings. Let's give him a flight helmet and some goggles. Let's give him a jetpack.
A cape, like they do later on.
A cape, right? No, we're going to make him fly with this raccoon tail. Again, it's just cashing in on that fantastic, imaginative, sort of everything rooted in Japanese folklore and how exotic that felt. You know, we were just like, I don't know, it's weird, but I love it. And it kind of felt a little bit like anime. This is when Nintendo started to feel a little Studio Ghibli to me. You know, I saw the Japanese tells and the manga or anime-esque sort of little sheens, you know, the little things that would give it that Japanese flavor. And it always kind of felt like that to me. And I think at the same time with the graphic improvements and everything like that, where it just almost felt like an anime. You know, I think Zelda was going through the same thing around this time where it was like, okay, now I'm getting a little bit more. It's a little bit more like watching a cartoon, you know. It's not
the instruction manual. The instruction manual really helped with that too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just all the marketing, all the illustration that surrounded it. And yeah, the illustration. Really, I mean, that was a big part of the packaging, the box art, the instruction manual was huge. And just making it feel like it was an experience and really captured our imagination because they had the graphic fidelity now to start doing that. And of course, Koji Kondo's music, where they took old Mario movements and arrangements and just gave it that calypso flavor and gave it that reggae flavor. It's so fun. It's always they're changing it. It's evolving, but it always feels consistent with the brand. It's really ingenious. It's the greatest some of the greatest marketing of the 80s and 90s, I think. Because it was always something new. It was always something kind of fresh to look forward to, but it was always rooted in that world. It always felt like Nintendo. It always felt like something appropriate for children, but that adults could also enjoy. And it didn't seem like it was talking down to anybody. It just felt like something brilliantly designed for everybody. That's really what Nintendo was. And that's really, I don't know. It just seems like, all right, we're going to make feature films and we're going to do theme parks, and taking it that way, I guess for monetary purposes makes sense to profit. But I would love to see the energy go into these games again. You know what I mean? Like, I would just love to see this again. It was I want to hold on to this time and just continue that evolution of what they would, which they did, certainly through the 16-bit age. And I would argue even beyond that. They were still doing that. This was kind of the outset. But
it would be cool for them to make a Super Mario Brothers 4, like call it that.
Absolutely. We always dreamed of that.
And we kind of got that with Super Mario World, but I don't know. You're right. You touch on something that's interesting too, and I think that intimidates me about whimsy in some way, about creating things like that, is that, and why I'm not really I'm much more drawn to realistic things in my own creations and in a lot of my own adult gaming, and that's not always true, but there's something really intimidating about being whimsical, because you kind of have to hope people buy into it. If you make a story and you say the government fell and there's this combat outside and there's a civil war, people can be like, all right, I get it, whatever. But when you're getting into, well, you're going to fly, you're a plumber, and you're going to fly through the air with a raccoon tail and bash these question mark blocks and eat mushrooms, and there's these turtles attacking you, and there's one turtle that's like obsessed with you and kidnaps your girlfriend, and people are like, what? Like, that could easily be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, just weird.
Right. And that's a level of confidence I don't think I have. And I think it's good shit. It's what you were saying. The Tanooki Suit and the using the leaf to turn into Tanooki, and then keeping some of the stuff from the original game. Like, I love Fire Mario, but then adding new things like getting the frog suit and being able to really traverse water using the hammer suit. Pretty cool. Obvious. But then you have the familiarity again of the star. And being able to store those items away, I think, is really cool too on that menu. I just love that.
Love it.
It makes it almost too easy sometimes, but it really does depend on what items you get and how many items you get out of the various games. If you're not really getting anything, if you're getting like good stuff, plus you're saving your P-Wings and your music boxes and all those kinds of things, you could start blazing through, getting your hammers to break the rocks and all of that. I want to talk about the enemies in the game, but I do want to begin with the bosses, the Koopa family. And I think Super Mario World gets a lot of credit for the Koopalings, but it starts here. And I love this idea. I don't know where they got this idea to come, like to make it his kids, but I love the different vibes they all bring, the different colors, the mildly different attacks. Like Lemmy Koopa has like on the ball, which is cool, like just randomly. So they didn't just, like with Boom Boom, they're kind of doing that over and over again in the fortresses, and they make those fights different largely by putting blocks around the stage so you can't jump in certain ways to make it more complicated. But here they do a little bit of work, like Wendy throws those circles at you and all of the rest. But I love that they have just personalities, that they're not just nameless kids, and that they're just working on behalf of their dad in these dope ass ridiculous airships, which I also want to talk about. But what do you think about the Koopa kids and the Koopalings, that the idea of his children? These are still iconic characters to this day. Hell
yeah. I mean, what did this game tell us? Bowser's back. Because coming out of 2, we're like, oh, there's this other guy, Wart. What's going on with him? So so far, we're 1 for 1. We got one Bowser. We got one big baddie. That's Wart. Where's it going to go? So it goes back to Bowser, who's I think still called like King Koopa. I'm not sure they totally embraced. I'm not sure NOA really embraced the Bowser thing quite yet, but I love that it's a legacy. I love that Bowser's back and he's got his little kids, and those are the minions. So it's a family affair. It's so fun, man. It's so colorful. And you name them all after, or most of them after, musicians. And they're the mini bosses. He's throwing these guys at you. You know Bowser's lurking at the end. You just suspect that from the start. But how colorful is this? You got these different looking enemies. They're not palette swapped for the most part. They're actually 7 unique mini boss characters. Give me my boss fights. I love this kind of stuff. And I love that it's his kids. And it's a simple story about him taking over Mushroom World by each one of these guys invading one of the countries, one of the castles, and stealing the wands. And Mario and Luigi got to get him back. at Princess, I guess almost Princess Peach. She's still Toadstool maybe, but at Peach's
she's request. Princess Toadstool in this game,
right? So it was just coming out of that whole thing, and I love it. I mean, it's so cute. It's colorful. It gives you the antagonist protagonist thing. It gives Mario more of a story, which I love. By the way, I gotta say, I realized this the other day talking to Helene about the show. I gotta reserve the right to go back and forth between Mario and Mario. I don't know what it is lately, especially. I think it's context. I don't know. So you guys will probably hear me shift around. So I'm hoping that doesn't get you too aggravated. It aggravates me sometimes, but there's like seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. I don't know. I had it beaten out of me. I just accept it. Shout out, by the way, to the fourth king whose nipples are showing in his sprite, which I love. Is that right? Which one is that?
He's kind of like a more fat one, and his nips are just out. Totally.
Is that Roy? I don't know if that's Roy.
Is that no? That's
Roy has the glasses. Lemmy? Is it Lemmy?
I'm talking about the king, like the king character.
Oh, the king. Yeah. Okay. He just has his nips out. Does he really?
Yeah, he's just hanging out with on the throne with his breasts hanging out.
Kyle, shout out to the boom boom fights in the mini fortresses. What I can't think of a video game thing that's more sneaky hard than that. Why is it such a nerve-wracking ordeal to fight that guy? All you have to do is jump on him 3 times.
Got to be aggressive.
He changes speeds. He might jump or fly, and he has those retractable spikes. But besides that, on its face, it's not a tough enemy. I've never had an experience like that. I felt the same way when I was a kid. It's just like, why is this so? It's so much harder than it should be. I don't know if it's like the ultimate thing that you just tend to overthink when you shouldn't. Because this is the type of game too. Maybe this is all classic Mario, but if you just loosen up and don't press and just sort of have a very laissez-faire attitude, you always do better than if you're super uptight and you're hanging on every moment, right? If you just kind of limber up, loosen up, take a breath, sigh, let it out, breathe through your nose a couple of times, just chill. I always do better. Like if I find myself only like half paying attention, I'm really in that space where it's like, I'm sick, like I'm on a roll type of thing. But yeah, when you the boom boom fights are such a reminder of that, because you have to do it over and over again. And it's like, oh my God, no, now this guy, I just made it through this fortress. And now I got to fight this dude. Because I think the mini fortresses, I would say pound for pound, are harder than the airships. I think they can be. Yeah. They, some of them become non-linear. And like you have to figure out which doors to go in through.
Yes. See, with the boom booms, sometimes you fuck it up and die or whatever, but I really find just being mega aggressive. You have to just like get on top of them and then like time your jump, so you're just landing on them again when they come to, and then just time your jump and land on them again.
You're right.
You can't play quite so aggressively against the Koopa kids, but you can do a similar thing with them as well. But yeah, shout out to the Koopalings, and yeah, the names are awesome as well. The Morton Jr. is like, wow, that's interesting.
You know what? This is what I talk about. This is something I learned I didn't know. Now, supposedly in the Japanese version, these Koopalings, as NOA would later go on to call them, were just kind of send-ups to Miyamoto's 7 programmers. And they were just kind of like a way for Miyamoto to kind of send tribute to his programmers, and sort of each one was an ode to one of those actual real people. Nintendo of America were the ones that said, we're going to make these Bowser's kids and we're going to name them after musicians or famous people or whatever and make them goofy. So that was another thing where it wasn't, I think Miyamoto, rightly so, he's creative. He's a brilliant man. He's one of my idols when it comes to chief creatives, creative directors, chief creative officers, whatever you want to call him. He doesn't have any of those titles, by the way. He still calls himself a director, which I think is fascinating. This is one of the most important creative people in pop culture over the last 50 years, you know. But it's not just him. Nintendo of America back then especially took a large hand, I guess under Howard Phillips, right, of saying sometimes the creative has to be altered, it has to be modified. for the United States. And they always did a really good job of that. Don't forget, this was during an era where manga and anime art was frowned upon by the industry and changed for box art and instruction booklets, and the lack of vision with that. Even with, I'm sorry to say this, Kyle, this might hurt you a little bit, even with a company like Enix, which was like, they weren't really, nobody was embracing the Japanese flavor of things.
Totally.
Nintendo of America always knew when to embrace that and when they felt like it needed to be changed. And they did an awesome job. It was an awesome partnership between Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Japan back then. I'm not sure what the dynamic is today, but it seemed less contentious and more like a creative team back then, a universal team that actually, by working together, made it work, especially in the North American facing way. I'm not sure how much influence North America had on Japan back then, but I think that's something that gets underpraised, and I think that's super cool, because that is what fed the experience, especially for kids like you. That's how you knew it. You never knew the Japanese iteration of that, or what so they actually made things more creative, which I think was really cool, rather than shooting the product in the foot and changing the box art and things that were going on industry wide back then. They were the leaders in that, I think.
I think you're probably right. It's frustrating because their whole box art, I want to know like what their studies and mentality were about box art. I mean, when you think about the early NES games, their box art's iconic, but it's not good. It's iconic.
You're right about that.
And you wonder, and then you see something like Zelda where they turn the cartridges gold and they seem to really get this physical sort of manifestation of the wonder of the game with the instruction manuals and the fold out maps and all of that. But then they continue to make other mistakes. It's very similar. People seem to learn. Capcom went through very similar. Konami's probably the only publisher I can really think of from that era that really nailed their Western box art, even though they were changing a lot of it, and sometimes embraced the original art as well. But their box art was pretty solid. Like all 3 Castlevania games, box art in the West is awesome.
They are
like awesome box art. Just absolutely phenomenal. Capcom had some bangers, obviously, with Codename Viper, I think is a really awesome box art and things like that. But
no, you're right. Konami always, now that I think of Bayou Billy and I think of
Contra.
Life Force and Contra. Yeah, they had a consistent branding, and with the silver, they stood out on the shelves. That was a big consideration, like you say, with the gold box art. But yeah, like if you think of the black box era, 86, 87, it worked back then because it was almost enough to be like, oh, this looks a lot better than Atari. But that notion expired quickly when video games got to start looking like this. So the black boxes weren't going to cut it. Just looking better than a video game from 1982 wasn't going to be enough. So you make a really good point with that.
Yeah, and then of course just all the dishonest box art, the fucking
false
Broderbund and like SNK, Playmore shit. It's just like, oh, well, they weren't even Playmore yet at that point.
That was just mean-spirited.
One thing I think is really cool about this game is the introduction to new enemies, specifically new enemies that become iconic in Mario. And what I like about this specifically, Dagan, I don't know if I realized this until I was older, but they kind of introduce them slowly and later. When you play the game and you play, like, say, World 1-1, 1-2, 1-3 to the first fortress, you're not encountering anything you haven't seen in a Mario game before. You're fighting Koopas and Paratroopas and the Fire Flowers and all those kinds of things. But when you get into the fortress, you start to encounter some different things. And you, for instance, encounter Drybones, an iconic character in Mario, an iconic character type that you've never seen before. And then when you get to the next fortress, you encounter Thwomps, which are also iconic. But then they sprinkle in things you've seen before, like Bullet Bill, but then they have like new just cannonball type enemies. They bring back Hammer Brothers and redesign them a little bit, but they also include Boomerang Brothers, which are my favorite, and the Fire Brothers and all of that. You see Chain Chomp for the first time in this game, and you see Booze for the first time in the game. And but then they have the return of the Lakitu and the return of the Cheep Cheep, and I don't know. I really dig it. And you go further and further, and then they introduce the Sledge Brothers, and it's so interesting. And the little piranha plant creatures and the dudes, the Buster Beetles that pick up the blue blocks. There's always something. There's always something being introduced. Like, you have to like bum rush them to the block. Like, but I love that they have. There's so many ideas and so many new ways to play. They didn't have to go. I say this sometimes, like, you didn't have to go this hard, but you did. The game is, I think, a half a megabyte in size, which is amazing. And there's all of this art, all of this programming, the sophistication underneath the hood, making this all work. And I just really dig that they took the time to do it slowly, get you acclimated. I think it's really cool that the familiar things don't hit you immediately. You don't see any of that kind of stuff. And it all culminates with the amazing airship battles, which we had brought up earlier. And the airship is just, it's brilliant. All the different things that are going on. He jumps on, first of all, the iconic, again, I'm using that word a lot, but the iconic jumping on the anchor and getting brought up as it's taking off.
So good.
And then you're on a scrolling stage that's also going up and down, that also has like the wrench throwing enemies and all the cannons going on and all the crazy shit going on and the afterburner, fire burner things. And you're trying to jump around. I just love it. It's just brilliant. It just really is. Yeah. What do you think about the enemies and all the rest?
Yeah, it's bad. The airships are badass. I mean, you said it so well. This game really does go hard, and the sheer amount of enemies to deal with is just unbelievable. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of enemies. First of all, I love that they bring in the classics. They bring back the Goomba. They bring back the Koopa Troopa. But then now they're folding in all these new baddies, and they're all blended in seamlessly to the game, to the tone, to the design, to the gameplay. They all work so well. There's such a consistency despite so much being thrown at you. It's just really brilliantly designed because it all works and it all feels right. And I think about it now retroactively, right? Like, we know Buzzy Beetle and Thwomp and Chain Chomp. These all go on to be iconic Mario villains that we see over and over again. But back then, it was just beginning, but they already felt completely integrated and they felt normal and it felt like part of the experience. And that's it. It just felt appropriate. And I love that. I mean, it's just brilliantly designed because almost every level, certainly every world, you're getting introduced to 2, 3, 4, 5 new guys, new obstacles, but also just new characters. And they don't feel like, not one feels like an afterthought. They all feel like they're just blended seamlessly into the experience. And that's what makes it so crazy. You talked about before, I love this part of the conversation, like whimsy versus weird. And it made me realize something that I don't think I ever thought of before. Whimsy is just something that comes off in the execution, or it's going to be weird, or it's not going to feel right, or it's going to feel like an afterthought, or it's going to feel like there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or that you're trying to do too much, or that it's sloppy. So that's really what it is. That's another thing where it's like the whimsy, it comes out in the execution. And every single villain, I have a list of them here. They're all amazing. And they're also all so good that almost all of these guys, I think with few exception, all come back at some point and become tied into the franchise. And it's so cool to see, kind of just go back and see the inception point for a classic. Like you were saying, what did we do? I was even part of some brand new game conversations this year. Dead Space remake, RE4 remake, loved them. Loved my time with the games, but it's so cool to go back and see a classic, not only a classic game in its own right, but the beginning of really, in many ways, a classic franchise, and really from that inception point. And I don't think I even realized that before I played this week. It was like, wow, this is the beginning of a lot of classic characters that would set the table not only for Super Mario World, but beyond that.
It's also interesting to think, I think Mega Man always comes up, but I think Mega Man might have beaten it a little bit to the punch, but it seems like it's one of the first games to really invoke the different worlds mentality too. You go to the ice world, you go to the water world, you go to the grasslands, you go to the lava land and all the rest. So there's that kind of variety too. But I do think that the fusion of the old and the new enemies, it's so interesting how the visual language works so well. I think about Lakitu, the very old Mario character from the first Super Mario game, and how modern he still is and how important he actually still is to everything. And I love that, because there is some sort of continuity in visual language that's understood through the different artists or whatever to tie all those things together. What are some of the enemies that stick out to you the most, like the random enemies? Are there any that you want to call out?
You know what I realized in this game, because I'm not a game designer, so I'm always thinking in terms of art, right? I'm always thinking in terms of design, colorful, maybe the lay of the land, what the landscape looks like, just the overall artistic package. But one thing I realized from a game design perspective in this is that you're getting attacked from above, below, at your level, things that change orientation. And that was the thing with the enemies, is that there's such a dynamic experience to just getting through a level, where the enemies are placed, what they're capable of, and how they work together. So it only makes every enemy even more interesting, because they're working in tandem. You meet some during certain levels at a certain point in the stage. I think one of those great enemies that's really strange, it has a really kind of a weird physics to it, is the Chain Chomp. They're really unpredictable. They do, like all the enemies in this game, again, brilliantly designed, they all operate under a specific set of rules. But the Chain Chomp is elusive, and it's not cheaty. It's not doing anything that it can't normally do. It kind of operates under a certain parameter, but they're still very unpredictable, brilliantly designed enemy. And I think I never examine things from that perspective, because I'm always oogling the artwork, and I'm not really thinking about, well, they designed this thing to work a certain way. And then the Chain Chomp is going to run you into this line of Goombas, but one has wings. So when you're landing, this thing is going up to get you, so you have to go under it. Just the way everything works in tandem and is seemingly pixel perfect. Because you and I have played those NES games, especially, Kyle, where it's like, wow, this thing was designed probably in 2 or 3 months. It's a buggy, sloppy mess. There wasn't a lot of thought put into it, right? This is just the epitome of everything. This game was play tested. It was built on so many sleepless nights, right? It's just a work of art as far in every way, but in terms of game design. And almost every enemy sort of works in that way. And also very simple mechanics, like the Boo. This is where we're meeting the Boo for the first time. All you got to do is look at him. If you turn your back, he's going to follow you. Simple premise, but really fun to play against, and really fun when you put it in a setting with other perils. And again, how they juxtapose those enemies and those traps and those pitfalls and everything like that. So even the piranha plants, it was like, all right, now we're going to make the piranha plant. Some of them you can't jump on at all. Some of them are going to breathe fire. So now they have a projectile. They're emitting a projectile to deal with. It's just taking those things. Same thing with the thwomp, the way you have to kind of fool it and you have to go under it when it's resetting. Just right. Everything.
I love that first lane where you first meet them and you just run.
Just run right through.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, it's cool. Very, very cool.
And rediscovering those things, right? It's like, why am I noodling when I could just run through? Don't you remember being 16? You used to just run through these things. It's always a new experience, even though you've played it a million times. And that's what makes it so amazing. The most aggravating, and the dry bones, right? Here, how about this simple idea? An enemy that you really can't kill. You could thwart it temporarily, but it's going to come back. And again, you put it in a certain setting, they move really slow, but now you're putting it in a certain setting, they become a force to be reckoned with. Again, game design and just how brilliant it is. But what enemy was driving me absolutely nuts? Oh, you know what it was? It was that fire snake dude. Kind of looks like a chain chomp.
Yeah, from the World 2 in the desert. Dude.
Those things were so aggravating because those were frequently set upon you during the auto-scrolling bits. And you had to find a way to, deal with them. And if you were small, and you didn't have another, lease on life, another life, then you were going to get trounced by these things. Those things were so aggravating. But again, nothing seems unfair. You just kind of got to think it through sometimes when you're dealing with the environments or when you're dealing with the enemies. And they're all adorable. Rocky Wrench on the airship.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah, he's awesome.
So
cute. That's so complicated because of the stage going up and down. It's brilliant. It's just brilliant. And I don't know if I ever realized this or ever clued into it. The sense of movement on the airship is awesome too. There's a cloud just going by every so often. It's extraordinary from a gameplay perspective. But Dig, I wanted to ask you a little piece of trivia because I wonder how this happened. There's an enemy from Super Mario Brothers 2 in this game, and I've wondered why that. Can you think of who it is? It's a regular enemy.
It's not the Buzzy Beetle. It's funny because I was thinking about the Bob-omb.
Yeah, the Bob-omb.
Right? Yeah,
isn't that weird? Like, I wonder. They didn't acknowledge in Japan at this time that game as a Mario game. I guess maybe in production they knew, but that they took that character from that game. So in Japan, Mario 3, that would have been Bob-omb's first appearance, and that would have been that would have been like an appearance from another game.
You're right. That's the only one.
This happens more and more. They've gotten all of them basically in there, Wart and Birdo and everything, which is great. But isn't that weird? I was looking through the enemy lists because when I first you see a Bob-omb, I think in World 3 first, and when that happened, I was like, oh yeah, they're in this game. And then I went and looked. I was like, don't they come from Mario 2? And they indeed do, and they are the first of their kind to get transferred over. I just thought that was kind of weird because it's like a cross-universe thing in Japan. It made more sense here.
Yes,
that would be in there. I thought that was an interesting little just throw away something.
I never realized that was the only one. And you know what? I was playing a little bit of Super Mario All-Stars, which is kind of like the 16-bit juiced up iteration of all the games. But I was playing Super Mario 3, and they make the kings sort of pre-cured transformed states. They're not animals like the spider and the dog and everything like that. They're actual SMB2 characters, like a cob rat or the little guy, that little ninja, or the little things that climb
that's so
the
interesting.
vines. So that was a real salute to including it in. But that is interesting that one character snuck in, because I know that's been sort of a contentious thing because that whole franchise is partially owned by Fuji, right? That was a project for Fuji.
Oh, is that right? So there's like some ownership things in there.
So that's why Wart and all those things can never really come back.
I never knew. I don't think I ever really thought about that. That's so fucking stupid though.
I know.
Because
just get it.
Like, just pay them.
Just get it.
Like,
it's so dumb.
That Wart never appeared in Smash Brothers is an outrage.
Oh, it's outrageous.
I don't mean that with any melodrama at all. Like, it's an outrage. He is the one character that's truly missing.
Yeah.
And it would have been amazing, like, to have him in there with all of his jewelry and like.
There's no other egregious character more than him, right? That hasn't made it in yet.
Not first party, no. I mean, there are third party characters that I don't think belong in Smash Brothers that are there, and then the ones that are in there that should be there. I'm a huge advocate of Dr. Wily as Pokemon trainer, right? I think that would be so cool to have him.
So cool,
and then you just fight the robots, and then he's like crying in the background when you beat him or whatever.
That would be so amazing. What are they waiting for?
It's too good of an idea. But yeah, Wart, I always just thought that was inevitable at some point. Like, I never really realized that probably is it. And that's probably that is so stupid in a universe where Epic Games, with a lot of money, granted, has convinced all of these warring parties to put all of their characters in the Fortnite, to the point where Master Chief can fucking kill Aloy or Nathan Drake or whoever can kill. It's like, Goku, get over it.
Star Wars characters, Dragon Ball characters, everything, anything.
Right, like, money talks. If you can give these people enough money, they'll let you do whatever you want with their characters. So I find it weird that would be the holdup for such. Maybe he's not that iconic and important, but I find that truly outrageous. Like, outrage, the actual definition of the word. It's an outrage.
It is strange. And why just Wart? Like, the shy guy is like a
Birdo.
Nintendo character through and through. Birdo, right? All these things. Yeah, but why just Wart? It's really strange. I don't know.
Birdo, the transsexual. I love that for people that don't know what I'm talking about, in the instruction manual for Mario 2 in the United States, Birdo is a cross-dresser. And I don't know if they retcon that out or if they lean into that.
That's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, because he's wearing the bow.
Right. And it's like, I think it's literally says something like Birdo is a boy who thinks he's a girl. I think that's what it says.
I think that's exactly what it says. Yeah, word for word. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if they ever did that.
I want to give a shout out to a few enemies as well. First of all, I love the little kid versions of the enemies. So when you have like the bloober in the water and he's being followed by all those guys, I just think that's really cute. I love the Spike character, the small green characters that throw their shells. Just think that's a really awesome design. Very nostalgic for me. I love the sun in World 2. It's World 2 Sun, I think, actually. I don't think it actually has a number, but just that is a tornado. And it reminds me a lot of that Mario 2 energy of getting the key and being chased by those masks.
Oh, by Phanto. Yeah. Very similar thing.
Very similar. And then I gotta give it up to Big Bertha and Boss Bass. Just awesome characters. I love the frenetic nature of those stages. You can kill them, I think, with fire or with the star, but they'll respawn. And I love how there's just stages where the fish are just flying out of the water and these things are just chasing you. It's so cute and really, really fun. That's why I think World 3 is a little underrated, but I love that it's the design. It reminds me a little bit of Gutsman, where it's got like a huge mouth and then just like a buck tooth. Like the fish has a tooth. And for some reason it just works. It's just brilliant. It's just really brilliant. I love the design language, and I'm looking at some of the sprites now. And then of course the different brother enemies, the Boomerang brothers, like I said earlier, just very, very, very cool. Very cool indeed. And another, I forgot, Buster Beetle, we talked about already, the blue block throwing thing, but also the stretch enemy, the platform that's the ghost.
Oh yeah.
Pretty inventive. I forgot about those guys actually when I was playing. So those are pretty cool too.
Super hard.
Wanted to give those all shout outs as well. Dig, I'd be loath not to mention The Wizard, the movie, which of course is where Mario 3 debuted in Western audiences. That's where we discovered this game for the first time and became crazy for it, and we're so excited about it. Do you remember anything about that?
I remember the movie coming out. I didn't see it in the theater, of course, featuring our boy Kevin Arnold. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, fine. Fred Savage. Yeah, I always prefer him as Kevin Arnold.
Yeah, he's Kevin. Kev.
But I love the story behind it.
Face or whatever the fuck. Scrote, yeah.
I just love that because there was that North American Nintendo chip shortage thing. They said, you know what? Let's capitalize by advertising the movie, at least in the meantime. So in between the Japanese release of the game, which most of us had no idea this was even a thing, and when it could be released in North America, let's advertise it, basically make this glorified commercial for SMB3 through this Universal Studios, The Wizard. And it was a giant send up to video games in general, but especially Nintendo, especially NES. And with the big reveal, of course, I had to watch the last 5 minutes because that's the reveal of Super Mario Brothers 3. And
I love that scene where the three of them are playing.
So good.
Together. Yeah, it's
amazing. So cheesy, but you can't even think about this game, at least from an American perspective, without thinking of this movie tie-in, because this came out December of 89, I think. So a couple of months before the game came out. And this really did serve as a commercial, and all the tie-ins, and just even if you didn't go see the movie and you were 16 like me, that they were constantly showing the trailer on television. There was, of course, the McDonald's Happy Meal tie-in, I think happened before the game was even released. So this might have been that milestone video game moment that people were looking forward to. Mario, we knew Mario 2 was coming because that was the first issue of Nintendo Power. So that will forever be tied into Mario 2's
right, the claymation
story. Right, the claymation cover, the hype. But this was the hype for this game. And again, just thinking of that period of a year and a half before the Super Nintendo came out, I'm not even sure. When this game came out, I'm not even sure we knew we were getting the Super Nintendo, although the Super Famicom was in the offing. Again, but there was no internet. You know what I mean? News traveled a lot slower. Didn't travel by boat. It wasn't quite a telegraph, but It wasn't like it is today where you hear about things minute one. There's no boundaries to information.
Right.
Back then, so did you, I remember this again, that was during the age where we saw, I'm 16. What else are we going to do? We saw movies every weekend. I remember this being a thing, all the movie posters and standees in the theater at the snack counter and stuff.
I mean, it must have been one of those movies that you just couldn't wait to get home and play games or something.
Sure. I mean, I think about it from a 6-year-old perspective. I would have been so hyped because the movie does, it shows like Ninja Gaiden, Turtles, Contra, SMB2. It's a love letter.
That's where we learned how to say Ninja Gaiden. That was the game that taught, or the movie that taught us how to say it.
Because the guy says it in that.
Or that we at least were aware that we were not saying it right, and then continue to say Ninja Gaiden for 20 more years. But
and there's a game counselor in there talking about Simon's Quest. Like it was a legit. Even as a 16-year-old, I realized like, oh, this is like a legit. It's not when you see them playing video games on Growing Pains and they're supposed to be playing a Nintendo game and it sounds like the Atari Pac-Man.
Or they're just doing this with the controllers. Like, I hate that shit. No one plays games like that. What game were you playing that you would do that?
I think they still do that kind of shit. Like, was it on Modern Family? I don't want to throw Modern Family under the bus for this if that's not correct, but it was something much more contemporary, and it was like, wow, they're still doing this?
It's like if you're playing a shooter, I have my controller in my hand for people that are watching the video, like this is what it looks like when you're playing it. Like that.
Right.
But they're playing, which is like a frenetic game. You're using it, but they're like pressing the shoulder button. It's like, no, dude, no, you look like a fucking idiot. Isn't that interesting when stuff like that gets through and there's no one on set that whispers into the director's ear and says like,
yeah.
I know I'm like the PA. Maybe you just don't do these things kind of thing. I don't know, but it's like no one plays games like that.
See,
I remember actually, you'll find this funny. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
You'll find this funny. I was when Fox owned IGN, they used to come in and do like film these game things or whatever. And I was in the background of one of the things they did once. Like Jessica Chobot was talking about a game and I was playing a game. And so they're like, all right, you sit in the background and you play your game. And so I had my hand in my lap and then they're like, no, you need to hold the controller higher. So I was like, all right, I'm going to hold it here. Then they're like, no, you need to hold it higher. So like, if you look me in the background, I'm like holding the controller like this, basically. Like in front of my face.
Very genuine, very authentic.
It's ridiculous. It's what I always say about the West Wing. I know I bring it up all the time, but they say Concord, New Hampshire multiple times in that. And he's supposed to be an old governor from New Hampshire. And I'm like, God, like, how did no one know that? How have you made that mistake? How does these people have so much power that no one said you don't say it like that?
There had to be somebody, right?
Right.
Yeah, not even a consultant or someone designed to do that, but just like, I know what you're saying, just like somebody who knows better.
Yeah, someone's editing it around. By the way, we don't call it Concord. And it's going to look a little weird for the 2-term governor of New Hampshire to call the capital of New Hampshire Concord. So maybe you want to fucking record a pickup.
It's true. This plays into the conversation. So it's like a much smaller version of the Jar Jar Binks dynamic. It's like nobody wanted to speak up in this. Really?
What was that guy's name? Not Ralph McCoy. That's not the right name.
Dennis Murin? No.
Well, it's the guy that
Lawrence Kasdan.
Kasdan, right? No. Kasdan's the writer. We're going all over the place. It's the dude I'm thinking of is the producer of the new Star Wars or the prequels. And there's a shot of him after they watch it.
And you can just see on his face. Yeah. He just knows. See, history was kind to that guy because he has that moment on camera. He can't be blamed.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I love that they released it. Like that's straight up from Lucas film or whatever.
Absolutely love that.
That there's so many shots from them making of those movies that are fucking hysterical. What a huge mistake that was. We miss you, George. Come back. You think he'll ever do something?
I don't know.
You think he'll ever do a Star? You think I'll ever invite him to do a Star Wars movie or something?
Does he have anything to do with the new indie? I should probably know this.
I don't know. I saw that they released a trailer, but I refused to watch it. I'm done. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry. I just can't do it.
It's hard. It's tough, man. I don't know. Why not bring back Short Round? There's something that wasn't, because this was prior to him winning the Oscar. As Spielberg already came down saying like he's not going to be involved in future installments of Indie. And then he won the Oscar like months later. And then it was like, oh shit, but you already weighed in. You can't do it now. You can't go back and retcon that net decision now.
It is interesting. I wonder, and I only mean this half ironically with those Disney Plus slates where it's all these ridiculous shows. Like, why not The Adventures of Short Round? So
surprise.
You'll get it. You're going to get it, and you all know it. And you're going to love it too.
I wonder.
That was fun. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say about Mario 3D? I mean,
it was nice to take a trip back in time and just check out a classic. And again, a game I like more now than I did back then. Just because you couldn't save it really aggravated me. And that's why I always liked, I think that was a big part of why I liked Super Mario 2 better than 3. I don't know. Super Mario holds a weird, elusive, almost unexplainable charm for me. Super Mario 3 is just one of those games that I can't even see anybody not admitting how brilliant it is. It's that good. I always knew it was better than my level of enjoyment that was derived from playing it. I always knew it was better than I was giving it credit for. But now it's kind of, the scales are kind of evening out now that I went back and really kind of took it in. And it's amazing. And it's so cool to see how the 16-bit games in Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island were built really on the strength of this game. And, again, just having, I was trying to think of my experience with RPGs compared to this game, but I think I wasn't a Dragon Warrior guy. So I think this predates my really getting into RPGs. My first one was Final Fantasy II. So this predates that. But I always kind of liked in retrospect that with the overall map, it had a little bit of that RPG-ish charm. And again, just the success of the overworld map and sort of plotting your course out, things being less linear, the way that would play into, of course, what we knew as Super Mario World. We always wanted to call it Super Mario 4. But that the way this kind of set the template for that, set the pace for what was to come. It's almost a 16-bit game. And just, again, like how just being able to wring the juice out of the hardware. Of course, there's enhanced chips in the cart too, but just being able to kind of maximize the strength and the powers of the hardware in just 2 or 3 short years. This is such a departure from Super Mario 1. This makes Super Mario 1 look poorly in comparison. And that's saying a lot because that game is a classic. Yeah, and it's just, I think there's something about the late NES games that aged well, because it was 8-bit perfection before the strength of the next technology that was going to be ushered in. It was really the best of what 8-bit could offer. And this game being the sort of the epitome of that class.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because again, looking at the Japanese experience, it must have been even more shocking because Lost Levels being their Mario 2 is just a harder version of the first game. So this is a pretty big jump. I think even though it wasn't quite a linear jump and it wasn't even intended to be a Mario game, that our Mario 2 kind of set us up for the possibility of something different in an era where, and we've gone into this on KnockBack over the years, but in an era where we were just getting lots of different games from that. They were much, for some reason, less risk averse. I don't know. But what's so interesting about this Nintendo 2 and especially with the Wizard and their aggressiveness there is how quickly they got scared away from multimedia. And that during this era with Captain N and with then the Wizard and then ultimately culminating with that Mario movie in 92 that was obviously very ill received. It's interesting how fickle they were and how they just got scared away for literally 25 years.
Long time.
More than that. And
that's a great point.
And so it all kind of, this game is kind of at the center of that whole first attempt. And I'm fascinated by that too. But overall, I think Super Mario 3 must play game. It's available in so many places. You can obviously play it on an emulator if you want, but you can play it on NES. There's a great Game Boy Advance port of it. You can play it on Wii, 3DS, Wii U, Switch. I still think the Nintendo the Nintendo Online service is a fucking steal. I cannot believe people were complaining about that price. It's unbelievable how much people complain about shit. And because when I go in there, I barely use it. But when I go in there, I'm like, this is amazing. I can just play whatever I want. And it's funny you brought up the NES Mini or the NES Classic, because I have one and I lent it to our nephews and I asked them to bring it to Easter dinner so I can play Mario 3 on there, but they forgot. That's why I was playing it on Switch. I knew they were going to forget.
No, you're right. Nintendo's online service is chock full of value. I mean, there's very few things in life that I would think would give you that much, even if you're a very casual user. I definitely echo that sentiment. And you know what I remembered about Super Mario 3, Kyle? This is a tell for somebody of my age. You'll remember this too. When the 16-bit generations were unleashed, the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo predominantly, but also the TurboGrafx 16, which isn't really a 16-bit console, plays a part in this too. When those consoles took over in North America, there were some 8-bit games, specifically NES games, that I would still play and that were still widely played by people. And this was one of them because it was as good. It was just as good as a 16-bit game. And maybe even better in some ways because it had so much to offer. I would put the Castlevania games in that class, the Mega Man games. There were still games that we held on to for a while, probably up to the mid-90s, when the 16-bit consoles were in full swing, that this game was so good that you went back to it even during that time, which wasn't really a thing because we weren't thinking about retro or nostalgic at that time. We just wanted the newest shit. The retro and nostalgia was not a thing, or we would have been playing Atari in 1993. That wasn't a thing. So that was one thing I remember specifically about this game is like, yeah, this game is still good. It still holds up way into the next years, into the next video game generation. So yeah, there's very few games that I would recommend to just about everybody, gamer or very casual gamer to no games really, that I think everybody could enjoy this game. And I wonder, it didn't seem to have that, maybe the Nintendo hype was wearing off, but when Nintendo first came out, I just remember everybody playing Super Mario Brothers, because it was a new thing. Maybe it was that first couple of years of excitement. I don't know if Mario 3 had that same thing, but eventually it was a pack-in. That's the other thing. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. It was a pack-in game. So
yeah, now it was a pack-in before the redesign. Because the top loader,
right?
I'm trying to think. The top loader didn't come with a game natively. I don't think. What I think it was that you got an option of like one of the red top games when you bought it, like any one of them you wanted. I think it was I
think you're right.
I think it was like it was a weird. It was like Star Tropics 2 and Mega Man 5. I want to say, and shit like maybe TMNT 3.
Shit, that might be right.
Like the red topped games, but what an era! I mean, just what an era when you felt like you could just wrap your arms around everything too. That's why there's no NES game. People, I bring this up sometimes. Cog and I were actually talking about this recently because I approached him with an Xbox game. I'm like, I have never heard of this game. Have you ever heard of this game? And that's very weird for it to happen to me, but that's impossible on the NES. Like you're never going to encounter a game like you could literally put 5 games in front of me and say 4 of these are fake and 1 of these is real. And I'll tell you the real one.
That's a great game.
Yeah. I've been thinking about trying to get a trivia kind of thing going on for us.
I love that
on Last Stand. I want to get it going because I got the for our friend Rick Hogue, friend of the show. He had a stroke, so I did a quiz show for charity, which I won.
That's so cool.
And I was like, this is good. Like, I like this. I know it's not unique to us. I know a lot of other people in a lot of other spaces do trivia, but we should do it. And
it's fun.
I would be interested to know how much you fucking chuckleheads actually know. Cause I put it on the line. I won that quiz show, so I'd like to see how everyone, and by the way, 2 of the answers were certainly right where we were. And I was busting balls with my friend Ains. He was like, I don't know if I told you about this. He was like, what was Mario's original name? And I was like, Jumpman. And then he's like, no, it's Mr. Video because there's like this thing about how he was, and I'm like, no, it's Jumpman.
I never heard of Mr. Video.
Yeah, I mean, it is true in like some weird sense, but
okay.
I'm like, that's not really it. It's Jumpman. So I'm going to take that. I won anyway, but I'm going to take the point. So I won it by even more.
That was all video. The Hogue thing was all video game trivia.
Yeah, it was all video game trivia.
That's awesome. That's super fun. Yeah, I love that.
And I was begging for PlayStation questions, and then they finally gave me one, and I nailed it. I was like, I told you.
That would have been bad if you didn't get it.
Oh, I know. It was a hard one, too. It was like, what were the 2 best-selling games on PlayStation 2? Do you know?
Oh, on PS2?
Yeah.
My God.
And I got it.
No, right. What were they?
Gran Turismo 3 was 2 and 1 is San Andreas.
Oh, that I should have got that. Yeah, I should have at least got that.
It's so quaint, though. We're talking about games, I think, that sold 15 and 12 million copies or whatever. That's like very, very quaint by AAA standards today. It goes to show you how, I mean, that's a lot of copies for a game to sell today, but the biggest games sell way more than that.
That's insane.
And so it's great to see how far our industry has come, led in sales, no doubt, by Nintendo. So nice full circle thing as they just release games. Like when Metroid was released and they sold, I think 1 or 1.5 million units. That's like a fart in the wind for them. It's almost surprising me that they even bother with some of those games, considering they can release Pokemon Arceus, whatever, and sell 50 million copies of it. It's $60 a piece, but I digress. Dave, that was fun. Let's end this episode of KnockBack as we always do with a dad joke.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah. You know, and I get our sister Allie's dad joke cards, as I get those out of the package here for you guys, I do blame a lot of Nintendo's, I don't know. This sounds harsh, but I'll say lackluster creativity just on the sheer profits that Pokemon makes and their involvement with that and the amount of money it brings in. Why do they have to do anything?
And they don't even own all of it. I'm so interested in how they haven't just acquired it.
Yeah, take it.
I mean, it's smart. I mean, these guys at Pokemon companies basically be like, we're good. We'll just take the residuals and our value just goes up and up and up and up and up and up and up. But it is funny that they actually don't have full ownership of that. Very similar to the Fuji story you were talking about with Doki Doki. Anyway, hit me with that dad joke.
All right, my friend. Kyle.
Hit me, Sergeant. Yep.
My wife asked me to go get 6 cans of Sprite from the grocery store. I realized when I got home that I had picked 7-Up.
Remember when 7-Up and Sprite were interchangeable at one time, and then they ruined 7-Up? That was probably like 20 years ago. I think it was because 7-Up was getting so badly outsold that they're like, fine, we're gonna just fuck with this and make it like the natural solution or some different thing. Because I used to, it was like Pepsi and Coke.
Yeah, it's Pepsi and Coke. 7-Up. Yeah. God, I haven't had 7-Up since I was a kid.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I have either.
Right?
Not since they ruined it. I mean, it's been years. Right, my friend. Well, that was a fun conversation. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about this today. I know people love our game conversations. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media, KnockBack, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke, and of course, Constellation. Couldn't do it without you over on patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access and more. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.